Victoria Vesna. Hi, Victoria. All our residents are on the panel, and I will pass it on directly to Ryan, who will introduce Victoria. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rini.
Hello, my name is Rayan, and today I will introduce you, Victoria. Victoria Vesna is an artist professor at UCLA Department of Design, Media, and Arts, and founder director of the UCLA Art and Science Center. With a background in painting, experimental media, and sound, her work has evolved into research-based practice, bridging art, science, technology, and embodied experience. Through immersive installations and long-term collaborations with scientists, composers, engineers, architects, and scholars, she explores how invisible systems and nanoscale structures and biological processes to sound, vibration, and planetary phenomena. She shape perception, collective behavior, and our relationship to place. She exhibited a lecture internationally as a North American editor of AI and Society, and is currently working on Vibrations Matter, the art and science of listening. So welcome, Victoria, and thank you for joining us for this series of lectures.
Obrigada, Ariana. Thank you.
Nada.
So thank you. This is wonderful, and I'm excited to do this talk because of this wonderful connectivity with Stephen Hall. And I'd like to mention that I'm very grateful to Irini and Susan Weitz, who invited me. And I want to thank Stephen Hall and the whole foundation, the whole group, and Nathan for preparing correctly. Being so close in the last few years physically, I had the opportunity to visit the gallery and the archive a number of times, and this really made me understand that Stephen's approach to architecture is not as an isolated discipline, but something that's not separated from natural systems, and also from artists who he shows and poets who come and join. And this is wonderful. And as I was preparing, a friend, Emily, pointed out the book, The Eyes of the Skin, which if you don't know the residents, you should. And I decided as I was preparing, I'm going to listen to this audiobook as I'm walking to the lake. And I was delighted to discover that one of the speakers was Stephen Hall, one of the readers of the book. And I thought, that's perfect. So it really talks about everything that resonates with what I have been working on for the past 2 decades, which I will talk about, that what we experience is not necessarily but through vision, but through our entire sensory being. And in many ways, this talk is about the embodied perception that I'm really interested in creating with installations for audiences. So before I begin the talk and our discussions, let's just take 1 minute, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes and just think about the space you're in and try to listen to it, to listen to the space, what you hear, and think about what you don't hear as well. What's coming to you from this monitor, the frequencies that come from satellites that are connecting to your Wi-Fi, some machine, maybe a next door neighbor. And then think about all the rest of us in our spaces. So most of you are in New York City, so you're close by to each other. Irini's in Greece, so we have to connect to her. And then, Ariana, are you in Portugal? Or you're
Yes, I am.
So there we go. So we have 2 continents going, and New York's kind of the central place, and Rhinebeck is where you will all be going soon. So I will do it. If you don't mind, you do it with me, and I'll put on my timer, and we'll do just 1 minute. Just to connect the space and resonate with each other. Okay, thank you. The timer's off. So we can begin. I'll start sharing my screen. And thank you for your attention. Okay, and slideshow begins. So I would just like to give a little bit of a background as how I started and all this, what we will be talking about. And it's really about thinking about art and science, and the fact that it was these two disciplines have been separated really artificially. And so even though I was trained originally as a painter at the Academy of Fine Arts in Belgrade, Yugoslavia at that time, it was very much a Beaux-Arts approach. So we spent a lot of time in anatomy and doing classical stuff. But I was really interested in music and all the scene going on. So I dropped out after 3 years and went to New York, East Village, formed a band, and began experimenting with film and video and basically taught myself electronic media. The band was becoming more and more successful. And then I realized that I had to repeat songs. I had to prepare, and this is not what I wanted. I had my set of lyrics, and then I would just perform depending on who's there, who comes to the scene with me, who I met that time. There was a core group of us who were always there, and I had a core set of lyrics. And so I decided that the music industry was actually even more constraining than what I perceived as the art world constraints, of course, with the gallery system. So when I went back to Belgrade and to finish my studies, I found a completely different scene. Conceptual art was booming, and Marina Abramovic, people like Joseph Beuys were visiting. It was just amazing. So I suddenly had an opportunity to employ all the stuff I learned with music and performance and relationship to audience and to space. I started working with animation a little bit. MTV was starting to happen. So all of this was starting to move and gel with all the conceptual art that was happening. And this is what kept expanding in my work. And so many years later, meaning now, something that I've been developing for many years, I became a kind of a seminar, a lecture series, and eventually developed into a book that I just recently submitted to the editor, I proudly say, although there's going to be many comments and revisions, talking about frequencies and vibrations, molecular and cellular vibrations, human animal voices and mantras, noise pollution, and the environment, weather, talking about brain waves and space. So all of what I'm just talking about is present with us now. So really talking about life as vibration, micro, meso, going from the atomic scale to the cosmos. And that took a while, and many different projects emerged through this research that is art-based research. And my mission as an educator is also to really point out how important art research is and how much it's kind of put down as a secondary thing, when in fact we research as deeply as scientists when we're developing our work. And that's true for any medium we're doing. So one of the things that emerged from this project was atmospheric sound, sonic art in times of climate disruption, which also took 5 years to develop. And by the way, all of this is online, so I'm just going to give you a narrative without going into details specifically. So this was a project that was part of Pacific Standard Time that is hosted by Getty Museum every 5 years. And the first 3 years are research, and the second 2 years, if you're, of course, funded, is exhibitions. And so this project became a way for me to really get to know some of the artists and other creatives working with sound and frequencies, the sciences, the kind of cutting edge science of working with sound and frequencies, even in medicine, and to invite them to talk to me and to work with me and my co-curator, Anuradha Vikram. And it really helped because it was a one-on-one discussion, performances, exhibitions, research, all about sound, atmosphere, and specifically looking in relation to climate change, or what we decided to call disruption, because change is natural, disruption is human-made. So to begin the story, I start with Buckminster Fuller, who I met in 1996 in Santa Barbara. I was teaching at UC Santa Barbara at that time. And she was very gracious and really liked the research I was doing at the time. I started a PhD later, so I was actually already teaching and working on a PhD with Roy Ascott in England. And the PhD was very much about networks. So the way I approached Buckminster Fuller's work was about systems and networks, both technological and biological. And the archive at that time was in Santa Barbara. So she allowed me to be there as an artist in residence, and I was able to go through his writings and all the different things that was part of his life, which was really incredible. If you think about it now, it resides in Stanford, and it's very formal to access it. At that time, I was sitting there alone, kind of going through stuff, which is pretty amazing. So I took this quote because I think it's a really important one, where he talks about the great aesthetic of the 21st century would be the invisible quality of integrity, intellectual integrity. So as architects, you know about tensegrity, and of course that was part of his thinking. And I started thinking in relation of tensile structures and tensegrity and integrity in relation to systems, both technological and biological. While there, I ran into an amazing essay in the Scientific American Journal, Architecture of Life, by Donald Engber, who was a medical doctor. I'm not sure if he's still around. He was in Boston. But it kind of blew my mind because he took the idea of tensile structures into cellular structures and then extended it out into muscular, into physical bone structures, and then physical spaces, architecture, etc., which is very much in tune with what Buckminster Fuller was working on at the time. So that started moving me in an interesting direction, which took me to finding out about the Buckminster Fullerene, or the way it's called, buckyball. So Buckminster Fullerene was discovered by Smalley and Croteau in 1985, sadly, 1 year after Bucky's passing away. And it is the third carbon molecule that pretty much changed, that revolutionized technology with nanotech. So the discovery of this molecule was really the beginning of nanotech revolution. And guess what? They were informed by Bucky's work. So when they were looking at this structure under the microscopy that was not nearly as powerful as the ones now, they noticed that one of them, actually, I'm not sure who, sorry, but said, oh, it reminds me of the dome I saw at this pavilion. And so they went and looked at the structure of the dome, and that helped them decipher how the molecule looked. which to me was such a beautiful way to show how much culture and art inform science. And a lot of times it's not the other way around. And therefore, the molecule was named Buckminster fullerene. This brought me to thinking about much more complex systems dealing with hexagons, especially. And bees, to this day, my most recent work very much has to do with sunflowers and bees. They're just an endless wonder, really, not only in the way they build, which now I have discovered actually they create these hexagons through the vibrations of their sound. The social systems, the sound, the food, the honey, all of this is just incredible and never stops teaching us. And of course, the fact that if they disappear, we disappear. So I really wanted to look at these systems as integrated and even to look at our technological systems. So I don't know how many of you can guess, but this is actually the mobile cellular system above us. It's divided into hexagonal sections, and each one of these would be a different provider. And so they kind of work together and not, but above us, there's this network of hexagonal divisions of the cellular divisions of the networks. And it was not done for any philosophical or aesthetic reason. It's because it is the most efficient way to work. And there is no squares in nature, very, very, very few. So this is how the buckyballs look under the microscope. And here's what I would like to do very briefly, putting on my teacher hat, to explain to you how this is viewed. It is not optical at all. So scanning tunneling microscopy is, if you try to imagine feeling the invisible. So this finger that you're looking at is 1 billion times larger than the molecule. It is as if the Eiffel Tower was the finger and the atom is the golf ball. So, I mean, it's actually impossible for us humans to really think that way, but that's the best way that you could think about it. And yet it's as different as it could be. And it's truly just empty space. So this finger that you just saw a second ago would be a very, very fine needle terminated by a single atom that's going across the molecular space and measuring vibrations, right? So the vibrations then are translated into data, and the data is translated into image. And that image is now what we see as the buckyball, the material. The technology has kept on advancing to most incredible degrees. And I have never stopped being fascinated and continue to be. So the best other way is to think about it is the record player. And I guess very much that they were inspired by this again. So because it's exactly how it works. If you're looking at the grooves and if you think of the technology of the record and the player, it's actually fabulous too, because you're literally going through the grooves, translating it into sound. Okay, so then we go into waves. And everything is waves. Everything is waves. But it's almost at every single level. In fact, the scientists had studies where they wanted to go as far down the atomic level as they could to see where something stops moving, and it doesn't ever. So at the lowest level in 100 degrees below minus everything, where everything would be frozen, there was still minute movement. And this is really important to understand because a lot of our cultural thinking is as if there's these moments of static or an end game to something. It's always in the process of change. And waves are part of that change. So there's waves everywhere. This is where we kind of started, just thinking about the environment in a different way. This is technological, but there's also other types of waves that I mentioned earlier. And then if you look at where we are, So we're in this structure. This is the visible light. And then if you look at everything else that surrounds us, all of this is not visible. And it's becoming so dense, both in our environments and outside, and even around our planet, with all the satellites and planetary junk, etc., that it's totally understandable why there's so much confusion and craziness in the world right now. So now we go back to looking at cells and thinking about how these vibrations were made. In 2002, the group I was working with and my partner at that time, James Szymczewski, nanoscientists, were supposed to receive these heart cells to test it for Carlo Ventura, who's a biologist in University of Bologna, and he wanted to see how the heart cells vibrate, which they do. That's another story. But because of after the 9/11, there was so much issues about anything biological coming across the borders. They couldn't do it. So it couldn't happen. But his group thought, well, let's try it with yeast cells, because that we can easily do. And they found that the yeast cells actually move and vibrate the entire time. So you actually see these cellular movements. Now, here's the thing. When they discovered this, we were already very much working together on a project I'll talk about in a minute. And Szymczewski said, Victoria's never going to understand this or get excited. This is really exciting. Why don't you just transfer this to sound? And they did. And so we could hear the cell sounds. And this is where it really did impress me. It not only impressed me, but a lot of people in very different disciplines, because suddenly we came to a realization that all of these data that are being translated into visuals can be translated into sound. So what you're doing is you're taking the data, you're amplifying it and speeding it up so it can be heard by us. And this became something that became really interesting to me. First project that we did together premiered in the Biennale of Electronic Arts in Perth in Australia. And this is where I started thinking of how buckyballs are represented, usually very static, like, in your chemistry classes. I wanted to talk about scale and also movement. So what you're seeing here is this is the person here and another person here. And they're manipulating the buckyball with their shadow. So it's also talking about not only scale, but also movement at a distance, that you can actually create change at a distance. Here's another picture of moving it. And then the story of how this project started happening. So back to architecture. So this is the LACMA campus by William Pereira in 1965. Here's another image of it. Oops. And so what happened in 2001 is that this space was going to be renovated, and there was a big call. And the call was for all architects, and I believe even Stephen Hall submitted a proposal. And the proposal that won was actually Oma and Ram Koolhaas. And this was in 2001, exactly when I came to Los Angeles and UCLA a year before, and exactly when I started working with the bucketballs and with the Nanolab. It was very exciting because this proposal was about completely dissolving disciplines, having it all horizontal. It was a huge, very ambitious project, and eventually it failed in the sense that even though it was accepted, LA Times, New York Times, everybody wrote about it, and discussions were going on, interviews. The funders, the politics, God knows what, I don't, it just completely stopped. And 20 years later, it was actually opened, and the person that won was Peter Zumthor. So literally 20 years later, it opened. And why am I telling you this? Because during that period, from 2001 to 2003, there was nothing happening in this space. And the curators at LACMA somehow, I can't remember how, found out about the work that I was doing, and also about the exhibition that was in Biennale in Perth, and invited us to give a proposal because the space was empty. So this is the extension space at LACMA. And so we had this incredible opportunity, and we worked with Johnston Mark Lee architects on developing a space inside. Because I was very much in the Bucky mode at that time, I was really eager not to have it in the usual box space. And so I kept talking about the Dymaxion map, and maybe we could create a series of installations you can move through. Because we suddenly had this 10,000 square foot amazing space, and it was just sitting there. We could kind of dream up anything. So it was just a wonderful possibility, and they very much responded. So this is one of the drawings that I dug out before this talk that they came up with. And what you see here is what we call the central cell. And then these other spaces were for the other installations that we devised and we had time to develop. Here it is again. So you're seeing how it moves through, and we're basically, the other part of was that I really wanted to hide all the technology, and we're talking about 2002 now, where everything was bigger and the cables and everything. So a big part of it was to hide it, so you don't see it. I didn't want people to be aware of the projectors and the computers, but to kind of enter into the space. And here's the maquette, and this is actually how it ended up being, very much so. So we had an interactive floor here that was kind of like a carbon floor that you enter, and then you had these robotic balls moving through there that were manipulated from the outside, and then these projections that were manipulated with the shadow. Here we had a nano mandala. It was a Tibetan Buddhist mandala that we went into the very bottom of the sand, another project not to talk about now. And here's a couple of pictures before we opened that I dug up. So this is the interactive table that was where you could see from bird's eye view the people that are in the main space, and you could manipulate the balls moving around, which actually was influencing the behavior of the people in the space. So when you enter, you are confronted with a swarm of cameras. As they dissolved the building, I found a whole pile of old surveillance cameras, and I thought, this is great. So we put them all there. Most of them were not working. I would say 99% were not working, but you had a sense you were being watched at the very entrance. And this is kind of these cameras that was all going to go to the trash can. Maybe it did after our talk, but anyway, after our exhibition. Here was a photo. We did kind of a hexagonal imagery of everybody that's involved. So you have all the students, and we were trying to get pictures of us when we were kids as well. So this all kind of continued, but very much to show how many disciplines were involved. So we had scientists, engineers, technologists, artists, curators, writers. Catherine Hales and her students got involved. She's somewhere in here, and they wrote a book about it. So we had a whole year to just play. So this is the atomic manipulation table that I showed earlier, where you see how people become like the atoms that are manipulated on the surface, and this is how it worked. And so what you're seeing here is the bird's eye view of the audience is walking around here, and these are the robotic balls that are kind of moving around seemingly on their own. And then the buckyball installation we called zero at wave function, which describes the electron and position of space and time and energy. And then the one that I just described earlier, I'll show you actually a little video of it too, but it was very much about Buckminster Fuller and the buckyballs. So here you are, that's another image of it. And then in the central space, I had two of our students. So Ann Nimitz was a grad student of mine, and Andrew Pelling, a student of Jędrzejewski's in Nanolab. They started collaborating with sound, and she actually did her thesis project in the space for a day, which is also something that's usually not done. So we were also looking very much at quantum space and the difference between classical mechanics and quantum mechanics. And that created this space, which was mirrors everywhere. So you're surrounded by mirrors from the ceiling to the floor to the sides. And again, responsive to your movement and sound. So you see yourself in many different places, and you hear yourself and you hear others. Very kind of confusing space, but trying to show how you can experience the environment in a kind of a more quantum realm. This is another picture that I pulled up because I wanted to show a more kind of elaborate version of this piece that I did at the Kunsthaus in Graz and Austria, where they really had the right people, audio, everybody was just so incredible. I didn't do this piece since because it was done so perfectly. And it's so demanding. It's really impossible to do easily. Here's a picture of it. People were lying down and really kind of enjoying this sense of weightlessness that happens in a strange way when you're surrounded by mirroring. And then we had the nano mandala, which I mentioned briefly, that was in collaboration with Tibetan monks who were creating a sand mandala next door in the East Asian Museum part. And I've always been interested in Tibetan Buddhism, so it just became kind of a natural way to look at empty space and how we relate to the mandala. It was projected on a bed of sand. So you could actually touch the mandala, which normally you can't. And there's an image of the molecule, the atom, and the grain of sand. So let's look at it just very briefly. I think this is a minute. Okay, so let's just keep going. Whoops. Sometimes when you're trying to move on from slides. Sorry. Okay, and wants you to finish. Another piece was against the wall. There was text that was coming in about transient space. And here's where I want to show how pieces start changing depending on space and place. So at LACMA, you had these texts that were moving along, and they would see you in particles, but as you pass, it would come a little bit delayed. And a couple of years later, I was invited to show that piece in Korea. By the way, I should say that those are sounds of the cells, the yeast cells. So it became a very, very different experience from the LACMA space. And I kept experimenting depending on different spaces. Here, I don't have time to show, but I was thinking of just showing one bit here. Here we go. This is in LACMA. That's me talking many years ago. Okay. Anyway, so we continue to the next one. I want to show how it changes in difference to space. So this is the blue morpho butterfly. And what's amazing about it is that the color, the blue color is not, it's our eyes seeing it. So it's really the patterns that are creating the color, which is also incredible. So we started looking at it in relation to, first of all, that it's endangered, and second of all, to think about how those patterns show up in nature. These are some of the scanning electron images of the cell structures of the blue morpho butterfly. And it was fascinating to me, but I really didn't know quite what to do with it. Here's some more imagery of how it's shaped and how our eyes translate this into image. This is magnified 10,000 times. And then we looked at the pupa of the blue morpho butterfly, and we noticed that it had a rhythm, the heart, like a heart of it that was constantly pulsing. So we're trying to think about how does the metamorphosis happen. And finally, because the chrysalis is too big to go under any microscope, they figured out a way at the Pico Lab that you can throw micro lasers onto the pupa, the chrysalis, and measure the vibrations. So here's the vibrations. And what was fascinating to me about it is how it was going up and down, like these huge bursts. So change does not happen incrementally, it happens in these big bursts. And this was exactly in 2008 when we had the financial crisis, which was also, if you looked at the market, it was going up and down and up and down a little bit like what's going on now. So I was relating it to our social environments at the time. And it premiered here. I wanted to show this space because I had a number of projects that I did this here at the Integratron, which is in Landers, California. And here's a very short video. I think, oh, okay, let me first tell you a little bit about it. So this structure has a crazy history that we could spend hours talking about, and I have been. But it's definitely, inspired by these Tesla coils. It was given to the ideas of UFOs, and here's a little bit of how it looks, but it's so this structure, let me just forward it to top.
Victoria, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry, I must have touched it. I was going to say this structure does not have one nail in it, and it's acoustically absolutely perfect, and it has mirror sounds too. So it's incredible to work in this space. Right next to it, close by, is this big rock that fell from a certain place that we don't really know. It's kind of mysterious. Under that rock was this person living under the giant rock, getting his messages from outer space. And it became this kind of 1968 convention. Howard Hughes funded the whole airport there. It's like the most insane history of this place. So I love it. And we kept working there, and we did a whole thing with Blue Morph there. So here's examples of how a project starting with the idea of the butterfly can merge and metamorphosize depending on different spaces. We had some actual Tesla coils outside. Here's people coming in. And then this was the very first iteration where you sit on this interactive seat and you're feeling the vibrations of metamorphosis that were the actual ones recorded. What I didn't expect, which I was really delighted by, is how performative it became with people. So the audience was very much the performer, which really was so exciting to me to think about. This is in Italy. This one is in Norway. This one is in Governor's Island Harvest Works, again there. And then here's like a short video. Those are the sounds. This is us setting up there. So the point here that I want to make is that, whoops. Oh my goodness, sorry. moving forward here. Sorry. But the point is how different these installations are, depending on the space. Just to show you, I think one of the most spectacular versions happened at the St. John's Cathedral in Poland, in Gdansk. And I have to say, it was so intimidating when I first walked in. I thought suddenly this installation that looks huge in some spaces would be so small because it's an enormous, amazing cathedral. But I found out that they had these lights for performances. So I asked them if everything can turn blue when one person steps on. And they said, yeah, why not? So you can just see, just for a second, I'll show you. Let's say, here it is. It's right here. I'm trying to move it. Yeah, so that's, if I can move this. I'm sorry about this. It doesn't let me move it easily once it's on video. All right. Another one, depending on spaces, and I'll finish soon, is a birdsong diamond, which I worked on with evolutionary biologist Charles Taylor for over 5 years. And we developed an idea of bird song in relation to language. This was in Tsukuba, Japan. And we had sensors on the whole body and we could move through space. So it was very much about moving through space and then going from huge VR space to Times Square, where you are suddenly with noise and people, and just thinking about how these different relationships happen to space. So she's listening to birdsong and these really great speaker headphones and trying to imitate them in this noise. But what was really fascinating about this is that it was visual noise that was kind of taking over. And so just to compare it for a second, this is in the Tsukuba University. So you're talking about this kind of space. So we're talking about the same work, but one is in public space in New York City with headphones and sound, and the other one is with VR that's completely over the top VR. And so I'll end with the last one. Actually, I'll stop sharing now. I'm going to stop sharing because I don't want to take more time. There's so much more I could show, but I just wanted to give you a sense of how these works can take on different shapes depending on the space, but conceptually they remain the same. So even if you're listening to the birds in Times Square or you're in a huge VR space, the concept is very much the same about birdsong. And there's many other examples I could show, but I'll just start maybe the discussion. Hello.
Thank you, Victoria. This it's a very complex set of questions and that you're trying to answer and practice through your art, taking us from the invisible at a nanoscale to something that we can actually feel or hear, emphasizing the audio. Maybe even more so than the visual, but perhaps both are part of that experience. that I think you're trying to connect the human body with, like things that are inaccessible otherwise, and how can technology really help us access things at the micro scale, and connect, so we can feel more bigger than we are in many ways. We can reach levels that otherwise remain inaccessible to us.
Yes, thank you for saying that.
Yeah. And I would love to open it up to our residents, as well as anyone on the attendees who can use the Q&A function. We are watching that. We're also watching the chat, so feel free to engage there. And you brought up a couple of things that I'm sure resonated very directly with the residents. Some were looking into vinyls, so the vibration on grooves and how kind of moving on these kind of grooves can produce a sound, as well as rock formations that very curiously connect, I think, with the works that have been developing over the last week in the residency. So I'll pass it on to our residents then. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Hi, Victoria. Thank you for your talk. I guess I was interested in one of the first projects you mentioned with the LACMA, you transforming that LACMA space, and how your strategy to hide the technology in certain areas. I'm kind of curious if or how the technological or maybe the functional aspects to realize your projects, how they've changed over time in terms of your usage and maybe exposure of them?
Oh, that's such a good question, because now all technology is hidden. So we actually want to expose them. So it's kind of, the tables have flipped, and you can see it also when you go to some of the sound art concerts. It's all on the tables. So you see all the cables and everything. But on a related note, the nano mandala that we did during the LACMA project was very complex to do at that time. The video of it was really 300,000 images. So it was going from photography, reaching the limit of photography, going to the optical, reaching the limit of the optical microscopy, and then going into scanning electron microscopy. And then it was summer, and I remember the whole lab was being used to create those images into a smooth movement. Okay. 20 years later, I just in April, with Haley Marks, who's at the microscopy lab at UCLA, we finished the medicine Buddha mandala, which is also Tibetan Buddhist mandala, but dealing with medicine and healing. And 20 years later, the technology is so much more advanced that when we wanted the resolution was so huge that we just didn't know what to do. So we kind of got stuck. And luckily, I'm working with Sang-Lim Han, my ex-student in Korea, who's in an engineering school. So she took it over and she said, I can do it. And then she went, oh, this is huge. So now we had AI working with us to make that imagery move smoothly. So it's changed quite a bit. And the power it uses, I think, is much more. So it's a weird time of balance. I'm also really interested, and have been for many years, in AI. But now I'm starting to wonder how we're treading that, because environmentally it's a disaster, the way it's done now, and how can it be envisioned in different ways. So the technological parts are always present, and to make them visible or not is really a question depending on what the message is, right? Anybody else?
Yes, I got a question. Like the
Sure.
example, I don't know the name of the work. Sorry, there was so many, but
Sorry.
the one in the cathedral.
Blue morph.
In many places, yeah, with the perception
Yeah, the hat.
worm, I will call it.
Yes.
So I was interested into, in general, like for sure you go deeply into the structures in a scientific way, how to also get to know in the concept, let's say the shape of things, to get to know them by digging deeper into them. But how much, and I think probably it was especially for that work, because it started with a butterfly that had that blue that actually you just perceive as a blue, but at the same time, in because you compared it to the different spaces it got installed already, and then you said, okay, you thought in the cathedral it just would be not fitting in the beginning, but then having realized that monochrome light of the blue made it even work even in that space. So in general, would you think that monochrome colorways of spaces also can amplify the yeah, in a conceptual way, to I don't know, from size to transporting. It's a difficult way. I don't know
Oh,
how
I
to
understand
pronounce it.
completely. I understand completely your question. And it's a really important one. That is actually at the center of what I tried to talk about today, and you're helping me articulate it. I really need to be in the space to plan my installations. So many times I get, like, for instance, recently there was an Alien Stardust, the work was going to be installed in Riyadh, and I couldn't go, and they sent me plans, and it was just so hard for me not to be in the space to experience it and see what color it needs, what sound it needs, how the movement of people happens, what is the mood, what's the budget, like even just very practical things, like what am I dealing with here? And that was such a moment, because honestly, when I walked in, I just thought, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, it only seemed like a small thing, but it became a message through those lights and that color in particular. I think the blue, which of course is Eve Klein and the sky and just like this sense of expansiveness, right? So if you suddenly have one individual step on the stage, and an audience member no less, and light up the whole church, the message became very much about expansiveness and the possibility of one person to kind of create change. And so the colors are really important. They're critical. And a lot of the colors have cultural meaning. So a good example is red. So in some places, red is considered evil and anger and whatever. And in other places, it's considered healing. So you have to consider cultural examples of color, and also how our brain is responding to these colors and to light and darkness. It's really critical, and I think a lot of times ignored by architects in spaces, but a lot of times using natural light, as Stephen Hall's structures, for instance, is pretty amazing, because it actually becomes sculptural, and you're embodying whatever is happening outside, inside. Many things to consider there. And I also worked with brainwaves and colors with Octopus, also that really taught me a lot about color. I can show it real briefly, like just, I'll send you the link. But this is called Octopus Brainstorming. And so here's how it works. So this was an LA art show, and what you see is two people sitting across each other, and when their brain waves align, you get one color, blue. When they don't, you get different sounds and different colors. So it's like jazz. So very briefly. So those are a cappella sounds, and each one of these colors depends on how they're relating to each other. And then the color of the black and white octopus on the screen changes also depending on what they're doing. So everything is changing according to how they're relating to each other. So a really critical question, Benedict, actually. And also to Irini's point, I use sound to attract people. I mean, I use visuals, I should say, to attract people to listen. So a lot of sound art is kind of just sound, but you're still bombarded with everything else. So it's very difficult to listen. But if you start focusing on the visual, which is what we're trained to be and how we are trained to think in our world, unfortunately, only that way, you start listening in a different way. And I think that's really critical too. So that the visuals are kind of eye candy that pull you in, and then you listen.
I actually have a question. I got very interested about that rock formation that you shown. I wanted you to do like a parallel between that rock formation and to your installation on that place, like to understand better like the relationship that they have with each other.
Which rock formation? I'm sorry.
That photo that you shown.
I think it was Landers, California.
Yeah.
Oh, Landers, the Integratron? The Integratron is called. So when I was doing the LACMA show is when I actually was told about this space. And I went there to discover it more. And so the women who ran it became really kind of they loved the work I was doing. So I ended up working a lot over there. Let me show you a little bit. There's a site. I'll share a bunch of links for you for this, but this is the site. And so it's just a wonderful place. And they now do sound baths there. And it's become a bit more commercialized just for survival. But are you talking about the big rock that's right next door?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's next door to this. And that's a whole story that's like insane because right next to where the Integratron is, there's a lot of military testing in that area because it resembles a lot of areas there's wars in. And this was around World War II time. So when they saw the person under the rock doing some things, they started getting paranoid that he's planning something, and they wanted to get him out. So, and he was like, it became this crazy story. The Integratron is a mystery. It really is. And Von Hassel, who was actually an engineer for aerospace, ended up getting so entranced with it that he started building it. And the beams around it were Tesla coils that never got activated. But the idea was that when you enter into the space, you start getting the vibrations that heal you. And then you would never really go to the upstairs space that, you know, now people go to. It would be mostly downstairs. So this whole vision of the healing space that was designed never happened. It just, and it sat there for a very long time. When I first went there, it was really in a bad state and they weren't sure if they could even handle it. It's also on ley lines. So underneath it, there's 3 underwater rivers, even though it's desert. And there's wells, and you know, it just goes on and on. A lot of people are fascinated by it, and I urge you to go if you can. It's incredible. Yeah. I worked there also for during the COVID time. I did the Alien Stardust there. Let me see if I can find it real briefly. I was working with meteorites, and of course, that was such a perfect space for that. So let me see if I can find the picture's worth 1,000 words, right? I can't find it. I don't want to take up more time. Oh yeah, thank you, Nathan. All right, so Jackie.
Yes, I something that really stuck with me is kind of early on in your presentation, you were talking about all the wavelengths that were happening simultaneously from, you know, micro to macro. And I was just kind of curious, just given that interaction is so important for some of the installations, kind of like what unexpected instances happen that maybe disrupted or created like a new consideration for you? Because technology is so much, I would imagine that the process is quite controlled. I'm just kind of curious about other things that might have came in that created new waves.
Well, I think everybody had the same disruption during COVID times. And so an example would be the Alien Stardust. That actually is a very good example because I'll talk over it. So I'm just going to remove the sound. But I spent 3 years developing this piece. It was commissioned by the Natural Museum in Vienna for a meteorite gallery. And it opened on the day that everything closed. And so talk about disruption. I was like, oh, but it was also like a really important message that I felt had to happen, that dust travels everywhere and 100 tons of space dust falls on Earth every day. So I was like, everybody needs to know this. Like, why is everybody closing doors when we're all in this one planet? So I started working online like this with doing online meditations. I'll show you briefly because a picture is worth 1,000 words. Here we go. And I'll do it this way so I can control it better. But so these are different meteorites. And this is the museum. And then the opening was, okay. So then I developed it into an AR. Then I developed it into an AR project and like a projection project and online meditation, all different things. And it really was a way to, the message became what was really important to me. So I didn't, the disruptions you work with, you know what I mean? And I think we're going to have tons of disruptions, like we are already, but there's also so much unexpected that we don't know where we're all going as a humanity, as a whole, with everything going on. So one thing that I learned through doing online, because we were all stuck, is binaural way of listening. So if we all had headphones and I played sound to you that was designed to be binaural, it's moving from your left to the right side of your brain, and it feels really immersive. And then the visuals were just meant to also kind of keep you focused. So these disruptions are welcome to me. They're really not fun at first always, but they're ways to think about how do I respond and not try to stay with my initial idea no matter what. Yeah. Hope.
I'm interested in knowing more about how you find like technology and scientific resources to back up your art making process.
So one of the reasons I am in academia is exactly that, because I'm like a kid in a candy store. I have access to all the labs. I develop relationships, so a lot of it is friendships with scientists, and they love actually when somebody's really interested and like truly interested, not just curious and then walks away, because you give a different perspective to what they're working on. And it becomes a really interesting dialogue on both sides. But as I retired from teaching, I went into a research professorship so I could continue having access to the labs, because that is really essential to my work. And the kind of microscopies that they use are millions of dollars. Like that's out of our realm in any possible way. But you'll find that scientists are really open-minded and really open their doors to artists much more than you would think. And a lot of times even students from one side and the other join together and work together. And hopefully more of that happens. I think it's terrible the way it's separated. So make friends with the scientist. Simon.
Hi. You mentioned that the formation of vinyls, because without completely resonating with what I was trying to do.
Oh,
We
yeah.
were trying to mid-review the other day. I
Really?
melted three. Oh, actually, I melted two, and I broke one vinyl just to kind of see how the texture changes. And they're like mostly inspired by the site that we are given. You also mentioned that like you always have the kind of the concept in your mind of transforming the sound to visuals. Wait, sorry, is it the other way around?
Data.
Yeah.
Data to either.
Yeah, I'm kind of trying to reverse engineer it. So like turn whatever visuals to whatever that can generate sounds. So do you have any like thoughts on that? And like any
Well, it's absolutely data. I mean, whatever. So all data can be transformed into either visual sound. And it's done a lot. I mean, you basically reduce whatever you're creating to whatever you want the output to be, if it's pure data. Computers are generally numbers, and you can move that around different ways. I would have to know a little more detail about what you're doing. But I immediately thought of like the golden record that they threw into space.
Oh, right, yeah.
So that to me is amazing, actually. And it would be fun to throw another record out there.
A prank.
So I'm very curious. I would have to know more to give you better detailed feedback. But I think records are incredible. And when I had my band, I was experimenting also with 45 format. And I saved, I think, two of these records that were purple. So I was like trying to do different things with them also visually. And it's an incredible technology, actually. It really is.
It really is.
Yeah.
Also, each of the genres that got recorded into vinyls, they create different general patterns. So like if
Yes.
you see it far away, they're all the same. But you zoom in really deeply, you will see some subtle differences.
Oh,
That
that's
kind
so
of change the
cool.
different dimensions of changes.
There's
Yeah.
so much you can do, really.
Exactly.
And you can make it also interactive where different things project depending on the needle. And yeah. But it's very much related to thinking about how nanotech works. And just like on a completely different scale,
Yes.
millions of times smaller. The last time we did the sand mandala, it was like 500,000 times magnified. What does that mean? It's beyond our human realm, really. But it affects us, just like microplastics and all the other stuff biologically that we don't see that are affecting us.
Mhm.
So it's environmental too, because they're plastic.
Yep.
The discs are plastic. Benedict, you didn't say anything.
Roy, I believe. Benedict, Roy is.
Again, it's a bit loud.
I did. I
Yeah,
did already.
yes. Oh, sorry,
Okay.
some more.
No, but actually it's interesting. So because once again, back to the question I had. So it was nice what we spoke about, but still, do you think monochrome
Color,
look,
sorry.
colors and stuff, are they helping to transport in a visual way the sonic atmosphere you want to transport?
Absolutely. I just think I would return back to cultural meaning of color, because colors have culture. An extreme example, we use white to celebrate in weddings, and in certain countries it's for death, right? So it's considered something that you wear at a funeral. So it really depends on the place and space with color. I think it's really important to consideration. You don't want to bathe the space with red color if it means something very different in one place than another place. And then also the frequency of the color is important too. So if there's ways to think about color in relation to frequency beyond the visual, that's also something that could be explored further. So it's you're talking about light, really, right? When you're talking about color, or you're talking about also physical
Actually,
paint.
what you said before was interesting for me. That so the light in the church was for sure artificial light.
Yes.
But actually, it's also interesting to combine real daylight with itself as the shape has a color, because also that will respond differently. You will create different shadows through daylight on a blue wall to a white one. So you have
That's true.
other changement of color through
It's
daylight.
a whole science. And
With
Terrell is your
objects.
man. Terrell is your man. Right?
True.
Yeah.
I was interested in like I found it, I really appreciated how your approach is situating your installations in like a very specific space, building. I guess I'm curious in your process, where like how do you approach your work without um being in that space, or before your work is fully realized in that space? Maybe like at a more intimate scale, whether it's at home or in your own studio. I guess, what tools or materials do you use to kind of start formulating the experience that will take place?
I think it's the same like creating maquettes, except you're not creating maquettes, you're testing it in small versions. And I relate a lot of how I approach it to, the way software development goes. Like you throw out a beta version and you're testing it. So I like testing my work in environments that are not important, or, you know, like a lot of people looking and curators, whatever, friends, family, whatever, and just kind of throw them in to see what the response is, and then go back to fix this. What are the questions, and go back. And I've developed a lot of apps too. So it's a similar process where you try it out, but not without response. I really find that it's really important not to be in your own head with it and just kind of keep doing it. I welcome invitations to kind of odd places with no budget and, you know, do some new stuff, try some new things, because it's like an opportunity to beta test the ideas and to talk to whoever's experiencing it to see how is it working. Is it like what I imagine? A lot of times you get new ideas from how people are responding to it that never occurred to you or to me, you know, to whoever. So it's and it depends on the piece, I should add. It depends on what I'm exploring at the time. So if it's birds, it would be a very different way to approach it. I would go out into nature more and listen more and come back and record and talk to science and kind of get all the different information. If it's planktons, it would be marine biology, swimming, kind of thinking about it in that element, in those environments. And in every case, it's what kind of space and vibration does that idea have? What is it? How does it want to manifest? You know, like, what does it want? What is the message, and how do you relate and connect to that main core kind of element of it? And then put it out there, you know, in whatever form, to test it before you actually commit to something bigger. And definitely beta testing. So the first beta test actually of the blue morph in that case was at the Integratron. And there I was actually so amazed at how people wanted to perform. And I really made that part of it, that the audience becomes the performer. I didn't start with that. I started with more like certain people experience. Somebody was saying bring in dancers, all of that fell out. It was just like, no, whoever wants to be in the center and perform can go for it. That's one example.
Such a beautiful conversation, Victoria. I think we're unpacking a lot, and bringing in more examples helps a lot. And I think making connections across scales is quite beautiful, feels very human. And it would be great to continue the conversation with the residents when we arrive in August. Maybe we can have you if you're available to meet and keep asking questions and continuing the conversation.
That would be really lovely. Unfortunately, I'm not in Rhinebeck right at those days. I wish you guys were there a little longer, because
yes.
I come back on the 18th. So.
Oh, I see. Yes.
But we can stay in touch. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to. I'd love to see what you do. Do you have a show at the end, or how does that work?
We have a final discussion of the works on the 27th on a Monday. It's coming up in about 2 weeks. So yes, you're more than welcome to join, and we would love to have you, Victoria.
I would love that. That would be so great. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to experience and feel it out. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you all.
Let me see
Thank
your
you so
hands.
much.
Thank you.
Hands.
Bye.
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 Bye.